Hi everybody, this is Brian Hurley. I'm the creator of Lean Six Sigma for Good, and I wanted to share with you an example that I thought might be helpful for understanding how Lean can be applied to a nonprofit. As part of my volunteer work, I've had some experience with quite a few different thrift stores or organizations that take in donations and process them and then resell them to help raise money for their organization. Most of my experience was in Portland, Oregon, where I helped with the Rebuilding Center, Free Geek, and then Habitat for Humanity Restore. I've also had a bit of experience in a couple different restores throughout the US. As I mentioned earlier, thrift stores use donated goods to help raise money for their mission. And the goal is to get donated goods sold as quickly as possible at the highest price possible. This helps them maximize the amount that the donated item brings into the organization. But they're also trying to balance to make sure that it doesn't sit there in the sales floor too long and take up space. Lean helps us identify and remove bottlenecks in our value streams to reduce time to sell and can also improve the quality of pricing items, which can help maximize the revenue. Let's look at a generic value stream process for how donations come in and out of an organization. First, the donor has to identify that an item needs to be donated and that there's still a value to it that someone might be able to use or that the nonprofit could actually sell. Next, the donor has to decide where to donate the items based on the type of item it is and the proximity to a nonprofit or a thrift store. The donor then drops off, or the store coordinates a pickup time for the item. The store then reviews the item against their criteria for what they're accepting and decides to accept it or not. The next step, the item is cleaned and a deeper inspection takes place to still ensure that it has the right quality and is acceptable to be sold. Next, the item needs to be researched to know exactly which price to sell it at so that it can hopefully get the maximum amount of price and not sit in the store too long. Next, it is moved to the sales floor where it does take up space, but it is available for customers to purchase. If the item does not get sold right away, there's usually a structured or unstructured approach to downgrading or lowering the price until it does sell. If the item does not sell during a certain amount of time period, then it's either thrown away or discarded. The money is then received when it does sell and it goes towards the mission of the nonprofit. As described in earlier modules, the goal is to identify your bottlenecks in your process. And we do that by looking for the inventory. In my experience, the warehouse is where we find a lot of partially processed goods. So they've been received in as a donation, but they have yet to make it out to the sales floor. When items are backed up in the warehouse, this creates a lot of waste of moving other items around to make space for the new stuff coming in. This increases the risk of safety issues or items getting lost or stolen or misplaced and therefore not being able to be sold to raise money for the mission. One of the most common reasons why the items get stuck in this partially processed area is pricing. This requires months, maybe even years of experience to be able to get the price right, not price it too low that it sells too quickly at a lower price, but not let it sit too long because the price is too high. We also find that a lot of personnel are wearing many hats in the organization, and sometimes they're busy and they get pulled away from the area where the donations are coming in, and that allows things to back up. Here are some examples of some warehouses that I've taken photos of from various organizations. As you can see, there's a lot of things laying around in the way, taking up space, and these items don't provide any value at this point. The items have been donated, but until they get out to the sales floor, they're not able to be purchased, and therefore money can't be brought in for the organization. A couple different things can be done, and these are some of the solutions that have been proposed with these organizations. One was to develop a pricing guide and then cross-train the staff on how to use the guide as a starting point for trying to price items. This helps get the employee up to speed much quicker than trying to memorize or learn this through years and years or months and months of experience. Another idea was to make the pricing person dedicated in the warehouse so they weren't pulled away to many different jobs. This allowed them to stay focused and make sure that they were not holding up the process. Some of the items do take some time to research as they're not sure what they are or they need a deeper inspection on whether they're acceptable for sale. So we want to make sure that that pricing person is there and available at all times. Another way is to allow newer employees to use the pricing guide, but then if there is something unusual or they're not sure about it, they can set these items off to the side and creating a pathway for those items so that they can be visible, that they're in a dedicated area that requires someone with more experience to come look at them and give a different price, but allow most of the items to get through and flow all the way through the sales floor. Sometimes we'd see that there'd be one item at the very front that is holding up the backlog of all the other items. So it's clogging up the entryway. And the other thing we noticed is that sometimes the item gets touched and moved around multiple times in the warehouse. So we would recommend a one-piece flow approach where once the item comes in, you go through all those steps we talked about, including the pricing, the cleaning, and then taking it straight out to the sales floor so that there is no stopping and starting in the back. Every time you pick up and set down an item, you have to remember where you left off. There's opportunity to miss a step or skip over something or do things multiple times. And that creates delays and slows down the total time to process all the donated items coming in. Most of the time we saw the staff would have to stay late and have to process these items before they left. And that's not a good work environment. We want people to be able to leave on time and keep up with the flow of items throughout the day. And again, we want to avoid that clutter, which creates a lot of safety issues. So the mantra we wanted to promote was, once you touch an item, don't stop it until it's all the way out into the sales floor. Once you're able to clear out a lot of these items, what we find is a lot of freed up space, as you can see in these photos. In this last example, we actually had helped the team develop areas for smaller items where they could store the items into bins and then the bins would go out when they got full. So they weren't taking individual items out all at once. That may not have been the most efficient way to do it, but they would collect up a certain amount of items that were similar and then those would all go out when the bin was full and then another bin would be set up to replace that. This created a little workstation that allowed the small items to be processed and quickly put into bins, and the bins were also priced in a way that made that simpler. I hope these examples help you understand how Lean can be applied to an organization that deals with donated goods. If you like to shop at your local thrift store or know an organization that sells donated goods, maybe you could go out and observe this process and provide some similar recommendations for them.